You're going to hate me, but we just don't need custom teams in F1 Manager. Now, before I start going through my reasons why I don't think custom teams should be in F1 Manager, there are a lot of reasons potentially why it could be. One, it could be quite fun. It could be a nice way to get your friends involved, for example. Like, you could create a backroom staff of your friends, effectively, or your family members, whoever you want. Now, that's all well and good. It's fun. You create your own sort of personal save. However, that brings me on to the first reason, really, why I don't think custom teams should be in F1 Manager, is that it's a real F1 game. It should be about you taking charge of an F1 team and bringing that F1 team forward from either the back or from the front, making sure that they win, or bringing a midfield team and actually trying to make them compete with the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull. And I think it should just be about that journey that you go on as a manager, because you're not a team owner. Basically, being a custom team is like you're the owner. I don't think that's what we are in F1 Manager. We are the team principals. We are the Toto Wolffs, the Christian Horners, the Otmar Safnaz. That's who we are, right? We're not the owner. We're not the Lawrence Strolls of this world. So we don't own the team. And I think it's really important to remember that we are not the owner. We are the manager. We're going to have a board. We're going to have, goals that we're going to have to meet and so forth. And if you had a custom team, how does that change the element of the game? Because what, can you be sacked from your own custom team? But your custom team, you shouldn't really be sacked because it's your team. And that's where I think the game gets a bit mixed up between owner mode and manager mode. And I think that's the fine line between the two game elements. What I actually think would be better is that you actually start from F3. Your manager starts, you have F1, F2 and F3 all open for you. And then you have the calendars and so forth. And then you start your manager, you take over an F3 team, any F3 team it could be, right? And you work your way up. Say Trident, I think Trident are in F3. So, you move up from Trident and you do perform well, right? You build up a relationship with those drivers that you've got, because that might help you later down the line as you progress further. You might go, I worked with X, for example. I might want to sign X when I'm in F1 when they're a bit older. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm more entitled to sign with you because I've worked with you before, and so forth. So that could be quite cool. But I actually think it'd be better for the game to have F3, and then you might, get poached, because obviously you can't get promoted. But then an F2 team, Prema, might go, oh, actually, he's done well. Let's go and sign him, and then you're now manager of Prema in F2. You could even be lucky and go from F3 to F1, right, if a job comes available. And obviously jobs should come available maybe at the end of the season. Team principals get sacked and so forth. Team principals might get sacked during the season, so maybe you can make a jump from F3 if you're doing really well to F2 mid-season, and then by the end of the season there might be a job in F1. And if you've done well in F2, maybe in one season you could get from F3 to F1 potentially. I'm not saying you have to, but maybe it might be great to have those, F3. You learn the F3 drivers a bit, who you might like. You're actually watching them race. So even though the driver ratings, which is quite interesting, because the driver ratings might say one thing, but you might go, actually, I've seen him race and he's quite quick. I'm quite interested to see what he does in an F2 car or in an F1 car, for example. So you might go, okay, I can work on him, but I know this raw talent just from watching him race, just from being in F3. Whereas when we're plucking drivers from F3 and F2 currently, we have no idea. We've only got the rating to go and we've not actually seen them race. Whereas in F3, F2, if we had that, we could have seen them race and go, actually, he was quite strong. I'm going to buy this driver, a Ralph Boschon, for example, a random one, I know. But I was like, he's got a bit of talent. I'm going to sign him and see if I can develop him into a solid midfield F1 driver in the future. And then my second reason is it should be a slog. It should be really hard in a custom team mode. Now think about it, right? Let's go back to 2010. We had HRT, Virgin Racing at the time, which was then renamed to Marussia, and then we had Caterham that joined, which was also Lotus at the same time. So Lotus then changed to Caterham. They were atrocious. Zero facilities, basically. They were super slow. Imagine your HRT, right? The worst car on the grid at the time. How many seasons would it roughly have taken for them to go from where they were to a mid-season midfield team, for example? It would have taken seasons. Like, for me, if I was to be a custom team, for it to be realistic, one, you should be super slow. That first season, basically finishing 21st and 22nd each race. And in a full calendar with 100% races, yes, you can fast forward them, but a full calendar of 22 races is going to be boring. By the time you get to race 15 or finishing 21st and 22nd again, you're not going to want to play anymore. You're going to want to go out, maybe I just try Williams, because at least then I can potentially get a half decent result. You know, the facilities are much better. I just think it should be a slog, like it should be a challenge, a bit like when at Motorsport Manager. When we were in Motorsport Manager and you went into the premier class of whatever category of racing that you were doing, it was horrible. That first season was pretty much the back of the grid, and then you'd hope that you'd made some improvements for the second season. You went to pre-season testing in Motorsport Manager and you were like, oh, I'm at the back of the grid again. And that's what I mean, it's a slog, and you're hoping for that progress. But I think with a custom team, you won't get it. You won't get that progress quickly that I think some of us might get if we were managing Williams, because there is facilities there, there are things there that can help you. And then that kind of leads me on to my third and final reason. We have to be different to the F1 game. This game has to be different because the F1 game has my team. And my team effectively is what everyone's crying out for. It's just you have to do the driving, and this time you actually get to hire 2 drivers. It's the only main difference. You still got to go through the R&D development. You've still got to do all of that in F1 22. So then it would effectively be the same game in my team and F1 Manager. You basically have the same game on 2 different levels, which I don't think Frontier and F1 Manager want. I think having you become the manager of that team and take that team forward is better than potentially bringing your own team, doing something exactly the same as what Codemasters have done with my team, and basically having 2 games that are pretty much identical. So that brings me back to my earlier point with the F1 game, is that you're not, in that you're the owner in my team. In my team, you're the owner. Whereas here, you're not the owner. You're the manager. So technically, you should be able to get sacked from your custom team, which I don't think people would want. I don't think people would want to get sacked from their own team that they've created. So I think, again, it's kind of that balance between, this is a management sim, not an owner sim. I think they're 2 kind of different games. However, that's not to say that down the line, because even Football Manager has create a club, right? But in a create a club, you have to actually relinquish a club from whatever league. So let's say if it was Formula 1, you don't actually start a new team, you actually take over Williams. So maybe that way that could work, right? You don't start a new team. I think how people want it is they want to start a new team. Whereas instead of having, you know, Williams, for example, you take Williams out, Williams mechanics all end up as whatever team name you call it, right? And I think that maybe is the only way that it could work, because that's how it works in Football Manager. You have to get rid of a club and you take over that club, in a sense. All the personal people behind the scenes and so forth. It's basically that club under a different name, same stadium, same place where it's located and so forth. I think that's possibly the only way we could get around that and make custom teams work and maybe make it competitive. But I've seen so many people on social media wanting to take over and actually start from the bottom. But as I said earlier, you know, that's basically the HRT Virgin Racing Caterham approach, and you know, you should need to prepare yourself, if that was to happen, to be at the back of the grid for a considerable amount of time. So that's pretty much it. That's my reasons to why I think custom teams don't need to be in F1 Manager just yet. Definitely in the future, I think it's definitely a game mode that could be added to the series. It just has to be different from F1 My Team, effectively, in the F1 22 game. As long as it's different, then I think it could be a great addition. But at this precise moment, I think it's more important to establish you as a manager than actually, you know, being this so-called owner of the team. But I want to say a massive thank you for watching the video. Please give it a like, a subscribe. Please follow me on Twitch as well. Once the game's out, annoyingly, I will be in Belgium for the Belgium Grand Prix when the game comes out. But once I'm back from the Belgium Grand Prix, hopefully it's not a washout as it was last year. Fingers crossed. We'll be on Twitch. We'll be streaming the game and come and say hi. But really looking forward